I'm curious what you thought about the BYU men's basketball team going to Texas Tech and losing. On the one hand, pretty predictable. You're playing a nationally ranked team on their court. So there's a part of me that just says, well, welcome to conference basketball and welcome to the Big 12. However, they were up by 9 with 9 minutes to go, and they gave up a 30-6 run. That's a little more than I expected them to deal with right there. So to me, that's a little bit of a red flag. How do you look at all of that?
Well, I think there were some red flags in watching that game. I think the thing that, Texas Tech is really good. And they're a group of guys that are seasoned. They're veterans. Toppin is incredible. Watts, Anderson, Pett. They've got a really, really solid team. I think it was a wake-up call for BYU, to be honest with you. I'm not sure exactly what their record is. I think the last time I looked, it was like 16-2. I mean, it's been a pretty unblemished record, but they got exposed against Tech, and they got exposed in ways that I hadn't seen. Number one, it's the first game where I've watched AJ Dybantsa not really be comfortable, and I think Tech took them out of their comfort zones. And Richie Saunders and Rob Wright are guys that have competed and played well, and Rob played really well in that game with 18 points. Richie had 19. But I just felt like it was a wake-up call for the entire group that, hey, you go on the road in this league, you better be prepared. And they got a great coaching staff, and they got a good team. But I think sometimes you need that smack in the face to say, hey, you know what? We're not maybe as good as everybody thinks we are. We need to really prove something to people night in and night out when we come out to play. And I think they'll learn from this, but I think it was a wake-up call. And I think that, you can't go on the road and not be prepared. And you certainly don't want to lose at home. But there's some big games coming up. And Utah's at BYU. Arizona is at BYU. And then BYU's at Kansas. That's from January 24th, 26th, and 31st. Those 3 games right there, those 3 upcoming games, I think BYU will take care of business at home against Utah. But it was a lot more competitive game than I thought it would be up at the Huntsman. And then, Arizona, number 1 in the country, playing at BYU. This is an opportunity for BYU to take a step back, finish a game against a big-time opponent, and get their confidence back and put themselves in a position to win this conference and to have a really high seed in the NCAA tournament.
I think the message from the coaching staff, we hear so much they've got the NBA experience. They're going to prep you for the NBA. I would think the post-game conversation with AJ is, 6 of 17 bad shooting games happen. 1 free throw, that can't happen. You got to get to the free throw line when the ball isn't going in the hoop. You're 0 for 3 from 3, it happens. And probably pull out Kevin Durant and Devin Booker stat lines and whoever else, maybe even Steph Curry. Even Curry might have a bad game. But it's always about the response in the NBA. Everybody has bad games, but you can't have 10 of them in a row. You got to bounce back. So in a weird way, I think that individually, what you said about the team, it's good to get hit in the face. Maybe it's good for AJ. And this whole thing about prepping him for the NBA, I think this fits right in the storyline.
Yeah, it does fit in the storyline. And I can't speak to what these guys are thinking, but from the outside looking in, there's a lot of hype about this team, and certainly about AJ. He's a freshman. He's a young player that hasn't gone through a lot of these experiences, and he got that gut wrenching feeling of what it feels like to really get taken advantage of. I mean, you look at a game where he's averaging 23 points a game, and against Tech, he struggled. And as they all did. I mean, Richie and Rob Wright both played solidly, which you would expect. But AJ's a guy that for them to get to the Final Four or get to a Final 8, AJ has to be a big part of that. And I'm sure that he's learning, watching film, and they've got a great coaching staff, and they'll work through that. But it is kind of a circumstance and situation, night in and night out now. Every game's huge, whether they're home or away. And, I think they'll take care of business against, Utah at home. But that Arizona game and that Kansas game are big games in terms of what the big picture is for them regarding the NCAA tournament and what kind of bid they're going to get.
There is a lot of hype. There should be. The top 3 players on this team or something else. The depth isn't what it could be. Obviously, they've had a couple injuries, but they got to figure that out. Everybody has injuries. You know, it's part of the deal. They played 5 other guys, and they combined for 12 points. And I think I'm most shocked by Keita. He's just so big. He's so physical. He's so active. Coaches love to say he's got a motor. Well, Keita does. I mean, it's clear how hard the guy plays. So for him to come up with no points, I'm wondering what you think about running an inbounds play for him when they expect everybody else and getting him a layup or a dunk, finding him on a lob, telling him he's got to beat his guy down the floor. He's athletic enough. He ought to be able to outrun guys down the floor. Because he ought to have 4, 5, 6 points every game. I mean, 0 in 21 minutes, that stuck out to me too.
Yeah, it does. And I think you mentioned it is a really good thought, is that when I had guys that were struggling, you tried to run an out of bounds play. You tried to run a quick hitter. You try to do something to put their hand, make a basket early in the game. And I purposely did that with players that were struggling. And then I think, with Keita, it's a great opportunity for a back screen and a lob or, whatever it might be. He's not a skilled guy in the low post where he's making step throughs. He's never going to be that guy. But I think if you can get his confidence where it needs to be, he can have such amazing impact on this team because he's just so athletic. And he's at the rim. He's a rim protector. He can rebound it, and he can run. And so I like your idea. I think I used to do it myself, is that guys that are struggling or having a little bit of confidence issues, put them in a position where they can succeed. And whether it's a quick hitter or out of a timeout or it's a special set or just getting the ball out to the rim. I mean, he's so athletic and he can catch and score around the rim. He's not a great shooter. His free throw shooting is up and down, but they can get him off early. They've got a better chance of winning than him struggling as he did the other night.
You are qualified to talk about BYU and how they need to handle this rare loss. You're right; they are only 16-2. Utah, on the other hand, is 9-10, and they are 1-5 in league. And Alex Jensen's first year. Now they just got the win over TCU for their first conference win, but then they went to Kansas State, and after winning by 3, they lost by 3. You're also qualified to talk about this. You've done a rebuild, you and Alex. You're living the same lives a couple decades apart. What would you tell Alex if you were talking to him or if he said, hey, come talk to my team, you've been through this? What's the message to a team that's 9-10, 1-5, overmatched, but can compete and does seem to be making a little bit of progress?
I think as a coach, and I have been through this, that you have to celebrate the victories. And that may not be winning and losing a game. You celebrate individual players that have stepped up in games and focus on the positive things. Yeah, you have to help. You've got to keep people accountable. I mean, you can do that in a positive way. I don't see Alex Jensen as a guy who's screaming and yelling at guys and getting in their face, but I do believe that there has to be that kind of accountability and expectations. BYU beats them 89-84. At Utah, very competitive game, and so it's not like they're not in a position to compete. I think they will compete, and they are they're overmatched. I think the idea that we expect them to, it's going to take them a couple of years to rebuild this program, but in the meantime, let's take it from a positive situation where we focus on what we're going to get better at, and do those things that we're going to have to, that we do well, that we need to make sure that they're complimented and supported, and they understand that this is where we are. You can't trick players. They know when they've got something pretty special. And I think that it's pretty easy as a coach. I remember going through a couple of really significant rebuilds, is they don't need any more pressure on them. What they need is support. They need guys that, from assistant coaches to team leaders, constantly talking, encouraging, and doing those things. That's not to say that they aren't accountable and that you shouldn't get after them if they're not doing the things that they should do in terms of effort or enthusiasm, those kinds of things. Sometimes you're just a little bit outmatched. And so I'll be interested to see kind of what happens here going forward. Listen, I just remember Alex as a player. He's competitive, a collegiate player as I've ever been around. And he played on some great teams for good coaches. He'll figure it out. And it's not going to be easy, but over time, I think Utah rebuilds this program and competes again for conference championships down the road.
The Jazz just beat the Timberwolves, and Will Hardy afterwards was talking about how, he appreciates these young guys bringing it every night and all that. And, it's like I got squeamish when he said every because there have been these 55-point blowouts. But I think rather than quibble over that, and we can quibble over 10 or 20% of the message, his bigger point about, number one, rebuilds are hard, whether it's college or pro. It's just hard to lose a lot. But I also think there's something, like when you were doing your rebuild, you didn't have somebody telling you, hey, you can't play your best player tonight, or you can't play the two of the three tall players you got on the team. There are nights these guys are they're, to your earlier point, they're smart. They know, we're going to be super small tonight. We don't really have a shot. The fact they've pushed through that, and clearly there's improvement that we as fans can see and media we can see, I guess you really got to pat him on the back for that, because it's got to be pretty demoralizing to say, oh, yeah, the next few games, Lowry's not going to play.
Yeah. Those are things that as a coach and as a fan, just put yourself in the fans' circumstances where they're watching these games. And I kind of got encouraged this week, and we're going to see how this plays out next week, and we can talk about it. But the Jazz at San Antonio, then they play home against Minnesota, home against San Antonio, and then home against Miami. And you've got a 6-game home stretch there where you can get some momentum. And I'm hoping that they can find a way to win at home. That would be just incredible. And right now we're not going to, start getting ourselves in a position where we get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But this is a week. This is a week that a win over Minnesota or a win over San Antonio and can really change the direction of this program in short term. But they need some wins. They need some, and I don't necessarily just mean winning games, but they need to have that mentality that they can do that. And you got great coaches and great athletes, but they're competing against great coaches and great athletes. So this is a big week. I'd love to see them at home to win 2 or 3 of these games and put themselves in a position where they can get the confidence and they can just breathe a little bit, take a deep breath. And we're not talking about strategy here. We're not talking about game plans. We're talking about just gritty, get down to it and get after it, get loose balls, block out, do the intangibles that really lead to winning.
I've been told by people who should know that the Jazz are not going to lose that draft pick. So I would think at this point, as you look, as what you said about Alex, you have to look at the small victories at this point and it'll drive yourself nuts, right? I think Will Hardy has done that, or it would have driven him nuts. And I think one thing you can look for is, guys, what I want you to do is play so well and so hard that Austin comes down and tells me I have to sit you. The ultimate compliment, right? Like, this guy's starting to be the difference between winning and losing. You got to sit him.
Well, I don't know if I jump into that because I'm not really aware of it. I mean, yes, I think you're right. I think there are circumstances in the league where you're looking to get a pick and you're going to do what you need to do to make the program better long term. And if that involves losing some games, you lose some games, or playing a different roster of guys than you do one game to the next. I can't speak for that because I'm not in the inside circle there. It does happen. It happens regularly in the NBA, especially for teams that are trying to fight their way to the top half of conference standings. You got to live with that. You do what you got to do. I'm not there in the inner circle. It doesn't make it makes sense in a lot of different scenarios and cases that they can put themselves to get better draft picks, to get a number 1 pick, and make their program better. But these are still young men and coaches who are as competitive coaches in there are in the world. I mean, you look at the NFL, the NBA, you look at pro sports. These are the most in tune, in sync, just literally committed at every level. And if part of that plan is losing to improve our status when it comes down to getting lottery picks and those kinds of things, then you do what you have to do. I've never been in a situation like that, but I understand the reality of the NBA and what you have to do sometimes for the long-term success of the program.
I look at how good Ace Bailey has been playing and the fact that he's getting better and the fact that he just seems to be a really upbeat guy. He seems to be good. It seems to be pretty genuine, and you never know. And young guys, and you're throwing them in a tough situation and all that. Like, if nobody really wants to sit through 38 more games of this, but man, if they can get somebody like Ace Bailey, and I know everybody wants Dybantsa, and I think you're probably going to have the number one pick. I know some people think he's going to go too. I'm not convinced of that, but we'll see. But Ace Bailey wasn't Cooper Flagg, but it turns out is a pretty good pick. That's what it looks like right now. So I guess I can stomach 38 more games of this so they can get that and then take the training wheels off next year and let's go.
I like your thinking there. And, I think sometimes we forget, too, that these are still young men from 18 to 30, 35 years of age, and their whole lives have been focused on winning and becoming champions and, wanting to put themselves in a place that everyone can be excited about here in this community. Unfortunately, the process is a difficult and challenging one, and it's time consuming. And I think that people have to understand, and I think Austin and Danny, everybody involved with that organization, have been pretty clear about what they're trying to do. I don't think this is a tanking situation. I just think it's a situation that how can we make our team better? And you get that by getting draft picks and connecting and getting trades that make your team better. We're not, if with any NBA team, you're not that far away from being successful and turning things around. But there's still a coach in me that wants to win. And if my boss tells me that we're not going to play these two or three guys, and I get the picture, and everybody else has a chance for growth. But I love the schedule this week, and maybe that I'm looking at it a little bit differently. But we can beat Minnesota at home, San Antonio, and Miami at home. Those are games you can win, and there's enough talent there. But that may not be the message that's coming down from the organization. If that's the case, that's what it is. But I'm going to watch these games with real interest to see kind of what the substitution patterns are.
Yes.
Very quickly in this game, I'll get a real close view of what's going to happen here, just watching the first 15, 20 minutes of the game.
Okay, let's say the quiet part out loud, Steve, so all the people who are commuting, who are driving defensively and being responsible citizens, don't miss what you're getting at. I'm going to look to see the substitutions carefully. Right, when you put 3 point guards under 6'6" on the floor at the same time, there's one part of me that says, well, you want to see these young guys play. You want to see what combinations work. That's perfectly reasonable. But when you've got Clayton out there with Collier and Keontae, you're way too small. You're like, you say it's not tanking. It kind of is, Steve. And they do get to see the young guys together and see if, hey, can we counter and go small? But that's not what champions do. That's what Don Nelson did back in the day when he knew he didn't have a winning hand. He's like, all right, I'm going to go outside the box. I don't have a winning hand anyway, but maybe I can find a way. And you can only finesse it for so long before you run into better teams and better people. And sometimes I look at those lineups and I think, Will's like, can I play this guy if we can do this? Because it's a competitive coach in you. And at least they learned they're probably going to lose with that lineup if it stays out there very long. But they do get to learn about those guys, and those guys have a chance to play and improve.
No, I agree. You're spot on there. I mean, it's a tough situation, and it does give you an opportunity to watch guys that typically might not even be playing significant minutes, and it gives them an opportunity. And so there's a positive there. You're developing players, especially some of the younger players, recently drafted and so forth. And then you look at going forward and realize that this might be the best path that you just mentioned. Is that if you put yourself in a situation where you're developing guys and you're helping them, who plays and who doesn't play, that's up to that staff and organization what they want to do. And I'm not second guessing them because I'm not naive to this. I watch these games. I root for them. But the process we're going through right now of rebuilding is painful. And it's probably, I always say this about the Utah fans. That place is packed.
I know.
I'm not going to games, and there are people there cheering, supportive. So the community is behind them. There's not a lot of backlash here in terms of what's going on. And I think credit to the Jazz and their organization, and with Austin and Danny, everybody, that, hey, this is who we are. This is where we're going. And, you just got to jump on and understand that it's going to take time to put ourselves in a position where we can be in the top half of conference standings.
There's a lot of energy here for sports, Steve, and we'll end this where we started with BYU women's basketball, and you talked about how, well, you're going to go and support Lee because you recruited him, and now he's coaching, and you coached, and it's your sport, basketball, and it's the building you know and the team you know, and you notice the crowd's doubling. It doesn't matter where you are. Weber State football is pretty far down the pecking order, but when Jay Hill won there, they started drawing really big crowds. Utah State, when I moved here, Steve, before you, that place barely had a pulse. There was nobody. They put together some pretty good seasons. They have intimidating crowds in football like they've had in basketball for a long time. I think wherever you are on the sports scale, and we can get into this later after you're gone, if you win, people here will notice and show up. But you got to give them a show, and you got to give them a good competitive team. What's amazing about the Jazz is they haven't been good and competitive for 4 years, and people are still going. There aren't many teams in the market that can get away with that.
No, you know, it's funny. You brought up something. I was thinking about Stu Morrill at Utah State and turnarounds, and a lot of the fan base may not know who Stu is, but just an outstanding coach. And I can remember the fan base. And I never forget this. I was watching the game, and it was, I believe that we will win.
Yes,
I believe that we will win, and it was just screaming in the arena. I mean, I get goosebumps right now just thinking about.
I do too. I know, it's awesome. It's awesome.
It was awesome, and so that's where we need to get. And I think that we learned one thing: Utah State was not always a powerhouse, and they struggled a lot early years, and then they got on a roll for about 10 years. And I'm not as in tune with what they're doing right now, but I do believe that you can have that mindset that I believe that we will win, covers a lot of ground for guys, for fans, and everybody that we're not quitting here. And yes, we may be, down a guy or two or three, or maybe we're sitting guys for other reasons. But as long as you have that as your foundation, that I believe that we will win on the court, off the court, draft night, whatever it might be, that belief is what keeps me watching college basketball and the NBA.
We're old enough to remember when that stupid wave was circling arenas, right? And now it's all the kids at the games taking off their shirts no matter how cold it is. There's whole sections of kids, and they're swinging the shirts and all that. But what hasn't caught on and what people should steal from Utah State is, I believe that we will win. The amount of doubt that has cost coaches their jobs because players had doubt. Like, the Seahawks have a great crowd, right? And they're famous for the 12th man. Can you imagine if in the NFC title game, if they started roaring, I believe that we will win? They'd be unbeatable. Guys would be like flying. They'd be walking on air 2 feet off the ground. Everybody would be running 9.500s. I mean, it'd be unreal.
Oh, no. That atmosphere in Utah State, I've never seen anything like it since. And I mean, you can get 20,000 people in an arena. It's never going to match that energy that they had. Now, I don't know what's going up there right now. I'm not even sure who the head coach is at Utah State right now. But that being said, I will never forget that slogan that accompanied lots of championships and recruitment of a lot of really great players at Utah State. And it's fun to be a part of that.
His name's Jared Calhoun, and I think he's a good coach, and I think he's going to get paid a lot of money to leave Utah State in a year or in a few months or in a year and few months. There's too many schools with too much money who are losing who could use somebody like him if he keeps it rolling the way he's had it rolling.